There's something magical that happens when the world grows quiet and darkness settles over the earth. Your mind begins to slow, your breathing deepens, and suddenly you're transported to a place where time moves differently, where ancient stories unfold like gentle waves against the shore of your consciousness. Tonight, we're going to journey and comforting narratives ever told. Together, through some of the most beautiful stories that have brought peace to countless souls across thousands of years. These aren't just tales from long ago. They're invitations into moments of profound tranquility, windows into a world where shepherds watch over their flocks under star-filled skies, where gardens bloom with perfect harmony, where weary travelers find rest beside still waters. Each story we'll explore tonight has been carefully chosen for its ability to calm your spirit and ease your mind into peaceful sleep. If you're someone who uses these videos to drift off, that's exactly why I create them. So maybe hit that subscribe button and let me know in the comments where you're listening from and what time it is, where you are. I love reading through and seeing listeners from Vancouver at midnight, London at dawn, Sydney in the afternoon. It's like we're all connected in this quiet space together. You know that feeling when your day has been filled with noise and urgency, when your thoughts race from one concern to another, like leaves caught in a whirlwind. That's when you need something different, something that moves at the pace of breathing rather than the pace of deadlines, something that speaks to the deepest part of who you are, the part that remembers what true rest feels like. The stories we'll share tonight come from a time when people understood the rhythm of seasons, when they knew the value of stillness, when wisdom was passed down through gentle voices around flickering fires. These are stories that have survived because they touch something eternal in the human heart. They remind us that peace is always possible, that rest is always available, that even in our most troubled moments, there's a deeper current of calm flowing beneath the surface. Tonight's story of creation itself. Not, we begin with the as a scientific explanation, but as poetry for the soul. Picture, if you will, the of everything. Very beginning. Before there were cities or cars or computer screens. Before there was any light at all, except for the gentle presence of a creator who looked upon emptiness and saw infinite possibility. In the beginning, the earth was formless and void. Darkness covered the deep waters, and there was a stillness so complete that it seemed to stretch beyond time itself. But within this silence, there was not emptiness, there was waiting. There was potential. There was the quiet breath of something beautiful about to ever spoken, gentle, powerful enough to bring as a whisper yet told. Then came the first words forth, light itself. Let there be light. And suddenly, where there had been only darkness, there was warmth and illumination. Not harsh or glaring, but soft and welcoming, like the first rays of dawn touching your face through a bedroom window. The Creator looked upon this light and saw that it was good. This wasn't the frantic brightness of fluorescent bulbs or computer screens. This was the kind of light that makes flowers open their petals, that draws children outside to play, that makes you want to sit quietly and simply be grateful for the gift of sight. And so, the first day ended, not with exhaustion or stress, but with the satisfaction of work well done and beauty brought into being. Night fell gently, providing a time for rest, a rhythm that would continue through all the days that followed. On the second day, the Creator separated the waters above from the waters below, forming the vast expanse of sky. Imagine looking up at this newly formed heaven, endless and blue, with clouds drifting like thoughts across an untroubled mind. This wasn't just empty space, but a canopy of protection, a reminder that there's always something greater watching over us. The third day brought forth dry land from beneath the waters. Mountains rose slowly, valleys formed, and the earth's surface took shape like clay in the hands of a master potter. But the land didn't remain bare for long. At the Creator's word, grass began to sprout, tender green shoots pushing through the soil. Trees took strong beneath the ground. Every kind of plant appeared, each one perfectly designed for its purpose root, their branches reaching upward while their roots spread deep and fruit trees heavy with sweet offerings, grain that would nourish countless generations, flowers that would bring joy to the eye and fragrance to the air. Gardens bloomed where nothing had grown before, and the earth became a tapestry of life and beauty. Can you picture walking through this newly created world? The grass soft beneath your feet, the air filled with the scent of fresh growth, the sound of leaves rustling in a gentle breeze. No pollution, no concrete, no artificial lights. Just the pure essence of life itself, thriving and peaceful. On the fourth day, the Creator adorned the heavens with lights. The sun was set in place to govern the day, providing warmth and energy for all living things. Its rays would ripen fruit, dry the morning dew, and cast long, comfortable shadows in the evening. But the sun wasn't harsh or demanding. It rose gently each morning and set peacefully each night, keeping perfect time. The moon was given dominion over the night, offering a softer light for the hours of rest. Sometimes full and bright, sometimes just a slender crescent, always changing yet always faithful in its course across the sky. And scattered around the moon like jewels on dark velvet, the stars appeared. Each one placed with care, forming patterns that would guide travelers and inspire poets for generations to come. Picture yourself lying on your back in a meadow under this newly created sky. No city lights to dim the view, just countless stars twinkling like friendly eyes watching over your rest. The moon casting silver light on the grass around you, a gentle breeze carrying the scent of wildflowers. This is the world as it was meant to be, peaceful and perfect and infinitely beautiful. The fifth day brought movement to the waters and the skies. Fish of every kind began to swim in the seas, from tiny, colourful creatures darting between coral reefs to great whales moving slowly through the deep waters. Their movements were graceful and purposeful, each one perfectly suited to its home beneath the waves. Birds took flight for the first time, their wings catching the air currents as they soared above the earth. Some sang melodious songs that echoed across the valleys. Others fish. Still others built dove gracefully into the water to catch intricate nests in the branches of trees. The skies filled with life and motion, but it was peaceful motion, natural and harmonious. Imagine standing by the shore of a pristine lake, watching fish jump in the distance while birds glide overhead. The water is crystal clear, reflecting the sky like a perfect mirror. The sound of gentle waves lapping at the shore mingles with birdsong to create nature's own lullaby. This is creation as symphony, each element playing its part in perfect harmony. On the sixth day, the earth itself came alive with creatures of every kind. Cattle grazed peacefully in green pastures, their movements slow and content. Wild animals roamed freely without fear or aggression, lions lying down beside lambs in the warm sunshine. Every creature, from the smallest insect to the largest elephant, had its place and purpose in the grand design. But the crown of creation was yet to come. From the dust of the earth, with infinite care and love, the Creator formed the thought, but as the masterpiece of all first human being. Not as an accident or after that had been made. Into this form was breathed the breath of life itself. This wasn't just biological existence, but something, and the human became a living soul, of communion with the Creator, someone far more wonderful. This was a being capable of love, of wonder, who could look upon all the beauty that had been made and appreciate it fully. Someone who could tend the garden, care for the animals, and find joy had been made, and be in the simple act of being alive. The Creator looked upon everything that hold. It was very good. Not just adequate or acceptable, but very good. Perfect in every detail, harmonious in every relationship, peaceful in every corner. This was the world as it was meant to be, before hurry and worry entered the picture, companions. And then came the seventh day. The before stress and strain became daily, most beautiful day of all. The Creator rested. Not from exhaustion, work was finished, the beauty, but from completion. The was established, the harmony was perfect. This, for simply enjoying the wonder of existence without, was a day set apart for rest, for appreciation the need to add anything more to it. This activity. It was the deep rest wasn't laziness or insatisfaction of work completed well, of beauty fully realized, of peace perfectly established. It was an invitation to all creation to pause, to breathe deeply, to recognize the goodness that surrounded everything. In this seventh day, we find the pattern for all our rest, the reminder that we don't have to constantly strive and breathe and appreciate the beauty struggle to make life meaningful. Sometimes the most important thing we can do is simply stop that already exists around us. As you settle into your pillow tonight, imagine yourself in that first garden, hearing only the gentle sounds of nature at rest, breathing air that carries only the scent of growing things, surrounded by perfect peace. This is your invitation to enter into that same rest, to let go of the day's concerns and trust that tomorrow will unfold, as isn't something we have to earn through, reminds us that rest it should. The story of creation built into the very fabric of existence from the beginning. It endless effort. It's a gift that was always there, waiting for us to accept it, to sink into it, to let it restore our souls, just as it restored the Creator on that first Sabbath day, so long ago. Picture yourself walking through that perfect garden in the cool of the evening, when the heat of the day has passed and the air is soft against your skin. The first humans knew this time as the most peaceful hour, when their Creator would come to walk alongside them in fellowship and conversation. There were no she, the simple pleasure of being present with one jewels to keep, no deadlines to meet, just another in a place where everything was exactly as it should be. In this struggle or strain, trees heavy with fruit off a garden, every need was provided for without their gifts freely. Clear streams bubbled up through the leaves. The ground was soft and fertile from the earth, providing fresh water that sparkled in the dappled sunlight. Filtering wasn't a place where, yielding its abundance without thorns or weeds, this anyone had to fight for survival. It was a place designed for flourishing, for joy, for perfect peace. The animals in this garden lived without fear, gentle hands to stroke their soft fur. Birds dear would approach with curious eyes, allowing would perch on outstretched fingers come from heaven itself. Lions dozed peace, their songs filling the air with melodies that seemed to, and their expressions serene. There was no peripheral patches of warm sunlight, their manes golden, just the harmony of all creation, data and prey, no struggle for dominance, living as one family. But perhaps the most beautiful aspect of this garden was the relationship between the humans and their Creator. Every evening brought the sound of familiar footsteps on the garden paths, and hearts would quicken with joy at the approach of the one who had breathed life into their being. These weren't meetings filled with judgment or fear, but conversations between a loving parent and beloved children. The sky in shades of rose and gold. The Creator would point, they would walk together as the sun set, painting out new flowers that had bloomed. Ask about their discoveries from the day. Listen with delight as they shared their wonder at the endless beauty surrounding them. There of birds settling into their voices would mingle with the evening chorusists, creating a symphony of contentment that seemed to rise up to the very heavens. In those moments, there was no separation between the human heart and divine love. No guilt, no shame, no hiding. Just the pure joy of being known completely and loved unconditionally. This was intimacy in its truest form, the kind of connection that makes the soul feel fully at home in the universe. Now let us turn to another story that speaks of rest and provision, one that takes place many years later when the world had become more complicated. when people had learned to worry about tomorrow's needs. It's the story of a shepherd boy named David, who would grow up to become a king, but who first learned the deepest truths about peace while caring for his father's sheep in the quiet hills outside Bethlehem. David spent countless days and nights in those rolling pastures, watching over his flock with a tenderness that came from understanding each sheep's personality and needs. He knew which ones were prone to wander, which ones were timid and needed extra protection, which ones were leaders that the others would follow. His care for them wasn't just duty, it was love. Long hours in the fields, David discovered, expressed through patient watchfulness. During those, something profound about the nature of rest and provision. He saw their shepherd completely. They didn't need to worry about predators, how sheep could graze peacefully when they trust lurking in the shadows, or whether there would be enough grass to eat tomorrow. Their confidence in their protector allowed them to simply be present in each moment, finding nourishment. And was during these quiet times that David began safety wherever their shepherd led them. It to compose the words that would bring comfort to millions of souls across the centuries. Words that flowed from his own experience of being cared for by a shepherd even greater than himself. He understood that just as he provided for his sheep, so he himself was provided for by the one who had created all things. "The Lord is my shepherd," he would write. And in those simple words, he captured a truth that transforms anxiety into peace. When you know you have a shepherd who sees everything, who provides everything, who protects from everything, then you can rest even in the midst of uncertainty. You don't have to figure out your own path through the wilderness. You don't have to fight your own battles against overwhelming your own water in the desert. You don odds. David knew what it meant to lie down in green pastures, those lush meadows where sheep could eat their fill without competing for scarce resources. He, as they settled contentedly into the soft, led his flocks to such places, watching rather than scarcity, from trust rather than fearishment, but about the deep peace that comes from abundance satisfied. This wasn't just about physical engrass, their bodies relaxed, and their needs. He also knew the still waters, those quiet pools and gentle streams where sheep could drink without being sheep, are cautious creatures frightened by rushing currents or dangerous depths. When it comes to water, preferring calm surfaces where they can see clearly and drink safely. David had spent hours finding these peaceful whereway, just on having water flocks' well-being depended nottering places, understanding that his available in a way that brought available, but on having it comfort rather than stress. As night fell over those ancient hills, David would sometimes build a small fire and sit watching over his sleeping sheep. The flames would cast dancing shadows on the rocky outcroppings, and the stars would emerge one by one in the clear desert sky. In those quiet hours, he felt over him with the same tender care he showed the presence of his own shepherd, the one who watched his flock. Sometimes wolves would howl in the distance, their calls echoing off the hills like warnings of danger approaching. But David wasn't afraid. He had his staff and his sling, weapons he had learned to use with deadly accuracy. More importantly, he had the confidence that came from knowing he wasn't alone in the darkness. His shepherd was with him, providing courage for whatever challenges might come. There were times when one of his sheep would wander off, drawn by curiosity or simply following a path that seemed easier than staying with the group. David would leave the 99 safely gathered and go searching for the one that was lost. Through thorny underbrush, down steep ravines, across rocky terrain, he would follow the faint trail until he found the missing lamb, often frightened and trapped in some difficult place. The reunion was always tender. David would lift the wayward sheep onto his shoulders, feeling its trembling body gradually relax as it realized it was safe again. The journey back to the flock was to rest in the strong arms of the one who had come to find peaceful. The lamb contented it. And when they rejoined the others, there was a sense of completeness, of family restored, that made all the effort worthwhile. These experiences taught David about restoration, about how souls that have wandered into peace He learned that restoration difficult places can be brought back to safety, and isn't just about rescuing someone from danger, but about the patient process of healing that time to trust again. To remember frightened sheep need happens afterward. Once more within that they were safe, to find their place the protection of the flock. In the darkest valleys, when shadows seemed to press in from all sides and the path ahead was unclear, David discovered that fear lost its power when he remembered he wasn't walking alone. The presence of his shepherd was more real than the dangers that threatened, more constant than the changing that wasn't just positive thinking or circumstances around him, this wishful hoping, but a deep knowing based on countless experiences of faithfulness and care. The rod and staff that David carried weren't just tools, they were symbols of protection and guidance. The rod was for defense the sheep. The staff was for gentle, ready to strike down any threat to correction, used to guide wandering sheep back to the safe path or to help them out of difficult situations. In the hands of a loving shepherd, these instruments in service of those who were vulnerable brought comfort rather than fear, representing strength use. Dee's understanding of being Davi shepherded became the foundation for words that would echo through generations, bringing comfort to countless souls facing their own dark valleys. He wrote of a table prepared in the presence of enemies, not hidden away from danger, but set up boldly in full view of those who wished harm. This wasn't about avoiding difficulty, but about finding nourishment and celebration, even when surrounded by challenges. Picture this scene from David's own experience. Raiders or wild animals might be lurking just beyond the firelight, their eyes gleaming in the darkness, waiting for an opportunity to strike. But David would calmly tend to his sheep, perhaps sharing his simple meal of bread and dried fruit, his oil lamp burning steadily beside him. The very act of eating peacefully while danger prowled nearby was an act of faith, a declaration that his confidence rested in something greater than his circumstances. More, the oil he spoke of, poured upon the head until it ran down in abundance, wasn't just about ceremonial anointing. Shepherds knew that oil served practical purposes in the harsh desert climate. It soothed sunburned skin, protected against insects, and brought healing to cuts and scrapes that came from long days in rocky terrain. When David wrote of his cup running over, he was remembering those moments when provision exceeded need, when abundance flowed from the simple trust that tomorrow would bring its own supply. Years later, when David had traded his shepherd's staff for a king's scepter, when palace walls surrounded him instead of open sky, he never forgot those lessons learned in the quiet fields. The same peace that had settled over his sheep in green pastures could settle over a human heart that learned to trust completely. The same provision that had sustained his flock through seasons of plenty and scarcity was available to anyone who would accept the care of the great shepherd. But there's another story of rest that unfolds not in peaceful pastures, but in the midst of a storm. It takes place on a lake that had known countless quiet evenings, its waters reflecting stars like scattered diamonds. The Sea of Galilee was familiar territory to the fishermen who made their living from its depths, men who could read the sky and predict the weather patterns that swept down from the surrounding hills. On this particular evening, the lake was calm as glass. A small boat cut silently through the water, its passengers weary from a long day of teaching crowds and healing the sick. Jesus, the teacher they followed, had suggested they cross to the other side for some much-needed rest. The rhythm of the oars dipping into the water was hypnotic, and soon Jesus had found a cushion in the stern of the boat and fallen into deep sleep. There's something beautiful about watching someone sleep peacefully. It speaks of complete trust, of being so secure in the present moment that consciousness can be released without fear. Jesus slept with the abandon of a child, his breathing steady and deep, his face relaxed in the lamplight that flickered gently in the boat's shelter. The disciples rowed in comfortable silence, their voices low when they spoke so as not to disturb their teacher's rest. These were men who knew this lake intimately, who had spent countless nights fishing these same waters. The The gentle lapping of waves against the hull was a familiar lullaby, and several of them found their own eyelids growing heavy as the boat glided through the darkness. But the Sea of Galilee was known for its sudden storms. Surrounded by hills and valleys that could channel wind into violent funnels, the lake could transform from mirror smooth to treacherous in a matter of minutes. On this night, while Jesus slept peacefully, the weather began to change. First came the wind, starting as a whisper, but quickly building to a howl that sent the boat lurching from side to side. Waves that had been gentle swells suddenly grew mountainous, crashing over the sides and soaking everyone on board. The disciples, experienced sailors all, fought desperately to keep the boat afloat as water poured in faster than they could bail it out. Through all of this chaos, through the screaming wind and the crash of waves, through the boat's violent pitching and the very real threat of drowning, Jesus continued to sleep. Not the fitful sleep of exhaustion, but the deep, peaceful rest of someone who knew that no storm could touch the deeper reality of divine protection. Finally, as the boat threatened to capsize completely, the disciples shook their teacher awake. Their voices were urgent, filled with the kind of fear that comes when experienced sailors realize they're facing something beyond their control. "Master," they called out above the roar of the storm, "don't you care that we're about to drown?" Jesus opened his eyes, and around looked at the chaos surrounding was still them. Water pouring over the sides, the wind howling light was still a living thing, and his friends were still gar of the boat with ipping the sides' white knuckles. But instead of panic, his expression was one of gentle surprise, as if he'd awakened from a pleasant dream to find everyone unnecessarily upset about something easily remedied. Standing up in the pitching boat, Jesus spoke to the storm as one might speak to an overexcited child. "Peace be still," he commanded, he said to the wind, the waves, and instantly, miraculously, the chaos dropped, till nothing ceased. The wind, the waves smoothed to glass, and the only sound was the gentle drip of water from the oars and the amazed fish-breathing very start of 12 Ermin. The silence that followed was more storm had been violent profound than the it authority recognized. Of natural was the silence of absolute forces be creatoring to theirs voiced at each other with. The disciples looked wonder, then back at Jesus, who had already, if nothing extraordinary had happened, who settled back onto his cushion. "As is this," they whispered to one another, "that even the wind and waves obey him." They had followed him for months, had seen him heal the sick and teach with authority, but this was something different that spoke. This was the kind of power the boundaries for oceans and command worlds into existence, that set the morning stars to the most remarkable sing together. But perhaps the thing about this story isn't the miracle of the cow, it's the picture-made storm of perfect peace in the midst of chaos. While his disciples fought desperately against forces beyond their control, Jesus slept with complete confidence that no storm could threaten what truly mattered. His rest wasn't dependent on calm circumstances, but on the knowledge that he was held by something greater than any temporary disturbance. This is the kind of rest that's available to every troubled heart. Not the absence of storms, but the presence of one who has authority over every storm. Not the guarantee that life will always be smooth, but the assurance that even when waves crash over us, we're held by hands that can speak peace into any chaos. Imagine yourself in that boat, watching the one who controls wind and waves sleep peacefully, while everything around you seems to be falling apart. His rest becomes an invitation to your own rest, a reminder that the deeper currents of divine love are always flowing beneath whatever surface turbulence might disturb your peace. As you settle into sleep tonight, you can carry this image with you. The storms in your own life, whatever they might be, are no match for the voice that can speak peace into any situation. The worries that keep you awake, the fears that grip your heart, the uncertainties that make you feel like you're drowning, all of these can be stilled by the same authority that calmed the Sea of Galilee. Let yourself sink into that same trust that allowed Jesus to sleep peacefully in the storm. Rest doesn't have for perfect to wait conditions. It can come in the midst of uncertainty, in the eye of the hurricane, in the quiet confidence that you are held by love that no storm can threaten. There's another story of rest that takes us to an even more intimate setting, to where a homality create friendship and hospita refuge from the demands of public ministry. In the village of Bethany, just outside Jerusalem, lived a family that had opened their hearts and their home to the traveling teacher who had become their dearest friend. Martha, Mary, and their brother Lazarus had created something special in their modest home. It wasn't grand stone walls that stayed cool during by the world's standards, just a simple dwelling with thick the heat of the day and warm during the chill of desert nights. But within those walls, they had cultivated something more precious than any palace could offer. They had created a sanctuary of acceptance, a place where masks could be set aside and souls could find genuine rest. Jesus had been traveling from town to town, teaching crowds that numbered in the thousands, healing the sick, confronting religious leaders who challenged his every word. The demands on his time and energy were relentless. People pressed in from every side, each person carrying their own desperate needs, their own urgent requests. By the time he reached the dusty road that led to Bethany, his human heart was weary in ways that only those themselves can understand who have given deeply oft. But as he approached the familiar doorway, he could already feel the tension. This wasn't just beginning to leave his shoulders another place to spend the night, place where he was truest sense. This was home in the loved not for what he could do, but simply for who he was. The door opened before he could even knock, and Martha's face lit up with the kind of joy that comes from a woman who expressly waiting to see. Martha was coming someone you've been love through service, through the careful preparation of meals that would nourish both body and soul. As soon as Jesus entered their home, she began bustling about the kitchen, her mind racing through everything she wanted to prepare for this cherished guest. Fresh bread would need to be baked, the finest oil brought out, herbs gathered from her small garden to season the lentils that were moved with practice, already simmering over the fire. Shared efficiency, her hands her mind plan a kneading dough, while the sequence of dishes that would make this meal memorable. This wasn't just hospitality, it was worship expressed through the ancient bread, with ritual of breaking someone beloved. Every ingredient was chosen with attention to detail that care. Every preparation made spoke of deep affection. But Mary had chosen a different way to express her love. Instead of buzzed herself at Jesus' feet in the main room, drinking herself in the kitchen, she had settled in every word he spoke with the hunger of someone who had been waiting for this conversation. Her sister might show love through serving, but Mary showed love through listening, through being fully present in a way that honored both the teacher. There, and his words, she sat, cross-legged on the floor, her eyes never leaving Jesus' face as he spoke about the kingdom of heaven in ways that made her heart burn within her. He wasn't teaching to a crowd now, wasn't miracles or Debs performing eating with skeptics. This was intimate conversation, the kind that happens when guards are down and hearts are open. His voice was softer here, more personal, as if he was sharing secrets meant only for the ears of those who truly understood. As the afternoon wore on, Martha's preparations became more elaborate. She could hear the murmur of conversation from the next room, punctuated by Mary's occasional laughter or thoughtful questions. Part of her wanted to join them, to sit and listen as her sister was doing, but someone had to prepare the meal. Someone had to ensure that their guest was properly cared for, according to the customs of hospitality that had been passed down through generations. The bread was rising beautifully, its yeasty aroma filling the kitchen. The stew was developing rich, complex flavors as herbs and spices melded together over the gentle flame. Fresh figs had been arranged on the best platter, alongside dates and almonds that would provide the perfect ending to the meal. Everything was progressing exactly as Martha had envisioned, yet she found herself growing increasingly frustrated. Every time she passed through the main room carrying another dish or tending to some aspect of the meal preparation, she saw Mary sitting in exactly the same spot, completely absorbed in conversation while Martha worked alone. The unfairness of it began to gnaw at her. Why should she bear the entire burden of hospitality while her sister sat doing nothing productive? Finally, Martha's frustration boiled over. Standing in the doorway with flour still dusting her hands and perspiration beading on her forehead from the heat of the cooking fire, she addressed Jesus directly. "Lord," she said, her voice tight with controlled irritation, "don't you care that my sister has left me to serve alone? Tell her to help me." The words hung in the air for a moment, and Martha immediately felt a flush of embarrassment. She hadn't meant to sound so sharp, so demanding. This was their honored guest, and here she was complaining to him about her own sister. But the stress of trying to create the perfect meal, combined with the sense that her efforts weren't being appreciated, had finally overwhelmed her usual composure. Jesus looked at her with eyes full of understanding and gentle compassion. He saw not just her frustration, but the heart behind it, the genuine love that drove her need to serve perfectly. His response wasn't a rebuke, but a tender correction that spoke to the deeper issue troubling Martha's spirit. "Martha, Martha," he said, and there was such warmth in the way he repeated her name. "You are anxious and troubled about many things, but only one thing is necessary. Mary has chosen the good portion, and few words. Jesus was, and it will not be taken away from her." In those dismissing Martha's service or suggesting that hospitality didn't matter, he was pointing to something even more important than the choice between a perfectly prepared meal. He was speaking about sinus and presence, between performing for others and simply being with them, of Jesus' presence rather than focus. Mary had chosen to receive the gift on impressing him with her abilities. She had recognized that this moment, this opportunity to sit at the feet of wisdom itself, was more she could prepare. The precious than any meal to be eaten bread weren't forgotten, but the words would nourish her soul for the she was hearing rest of her life. But there's profound, isn't there? Martha's desire to serve came beauty in both responses, from a heart overflowing with love, just as Mary's desire to listen came from the same source. The difference wasn't in the love itself, but in understanding what was most needed in that particular moment. Picture the cool stone beneath your feet and yourself in that room in Bethany, feeling the breathing air scented with baking bread and burning olive oil. You can choose where Martha in the kitchen, finding to focus your attention. You can join peace in the rhythm, kneading Anne of KD stirring, expressing love through the ancient art of hospitality. Or you can settle beside Mary on the floor, letting your that speak directly to your deep racing thoughts. Slow down as you absorb wordsist hunger. Perhaps the most beautiful thing about this story is that it shows us both paths available. It also reminds expressions of love, buts us that sometimes the most important are frantic activity, and be present with what thing we can do is simply stop gift of our full, the greatest. Whether to others gift we can give, or to ourselves, is the truly matters. Sometimes attention. In our world of constant motion and endless tasks, we are all Martha at times, rushing around trying to create the perfect environment while missing the very thing we're rushing to prepare for. We clean the house for guests, but forget to enjoy their company once they arrive. We work so hard to provide for our families that we miss the simple joy of being with them. We prepare so diligently for moments of rest that we exhaust ourselves before we can actually rest. The invitation of this story is to consider what Mary understood so intuitively. That presence is often more valuable than performance. That listening can be more important than speaking. That sometimes the most productive thing we can do is sit still and receive whatever gift the moment is offering us. As you settle into yourself making Mary's choice, set your pillow tonight. Imagine aside the mental list of everything you need to accomplish tomorrow. Stop rehearsing the conversations you wish you'd had differently today. Instead, simply be present with this moment, this breath, this opportunity to rest without agenda or expectation. There's a story from much earlier in time that speaks to the same truth Mary discovered, but in an even more dramatic setting. It takes place in the wilderness, where an entire nation had been learning hard lessons about trust and provision. The Israelites had been freed from slavery in Egypt, but freedom had brought its own challenges as they wandered through the desert toward the land that had been promised to their ancestors. Day after day, they walked across landscapes that seemed endless and barren. The sun beat down mercilessly during the day, and the temperature dropped dramatically once darkness fell. Water was scarce, found only at occasional oases that appeared like miracles in the vast expanse of sand and rock. Food was even scarcer, and the memory of regular meals in Egypt began to seem preferable to this uncertain existence in the wilderness. Their complaints grew louder with each passing day. At least in Egypt, we knew where our next meal was coming from. They grumbled to Moses, their leader. We may have been slaves, but we were fed slaves. Out here, we're going to starve to death in this God-forsaken desert. Moses brought their complaints before the Lord, and the response was both surprising and wonderful. Instead of rebuke for their lack of faith, there came a promise of provision that would teach them something profound about the nature of trust and daily dependence on divine care. Tomorrow morning, they were told, you will find bread covering the ground like dew, but there would be conditions attached to this gift that would challenge everything they thought they knew about security and planning for the future. As the sun rose on that first morning of provision, the Israelites emerged from their tents to find the ground covered with something they had never seen before. It appeared with the dew, small and white like hoarfrost, with a taste that was sweet like honey wafers. They called it manna, meaning what is it, because it defied all their categories for understanding. But the instructions that came with this miraculous food were very specific. Each person was to gather only what they needed for that day. No more, no less. They were not to try to save any for tomorrow, not to hoard against future uncertainty, not to gather extra as insurance against the possibility that the provision might not come again. For people who had lived through famine and slavery, who protecting resources, this was perhaps the most difficult, had learned that survival depended on accumulating an instruction they had ever received. Every instinct screamed against it. What if the manna didn't appear tomorrow? What if this was just a one-time miracle? Wouldn't it be wise to gather extra, just in case? Some tried to the clear instructions. They gathered more than dough, exactly that, despite they needed and tried to store it overnight. But when morning-guarded manna was crawling with W came, their haunches and reeking with decay. The extra they had gathered out of fear had become worthless, while fresh bread covered the ground outside day. This pattern continued. Every their tents once again, day after what was needed for that day. The lesson morning brought exactly what was needed, but only was unmistakable. Provision was available, but it required daily trust rather than angst handle every possible future scenario, but from the confidentious accumulation. Security came not from having enough stored up to that each day would bring exactly what that day required. But there was one exception to this daily gathering pattern, and it revealed something even more beautiful about the heart of the one who was providing for them. On the 6th day of each week, they were instructed to gather twice as much as usual. This extra portion wouldn't spoil like the hoarded manna had, because it was being set aside not out of fearful greed, but in preparation for something sacred. The 7th day was to be a Sabbath, a day of complete rest when no work would be done, not even the simple task of gathering food from the ground. The double portion gathered on the 6th day would remain fresh and nourishing, ensuring that the Sabbath could be observed without any anxiety about provision. Picture the peace that must have settled over the camp on those Sabbath mornings. No one rushing out to gather the day's bread. No one worried about whether there would be enough. Just the quiet confidence that they were cared for so completely that even their rest had been provided for in advance. This wasn't just about food, of course. It was about learning a completely different way of relating to time, to resources, to the future itself. Instead of the frantic accumulation that characterizes so much of human behavior, they were being taught the deep rest that comes from daily dependence on unfailing provision. For 40 years, this pattern continued. Every morning except the Sabbath, fresh bread appeared with the dew. Every day, the choice between trust and anxiety was presented again. Gather what you need for today, and we'll bring its deed trust that tomorrow own supply the time. By they finally entered the promised land, an entire generation had grown up knowing this rhythm of daily provision and weekly rest. They had learned in their bodies and their souls that security doesn't come from having enough stored up to handle every possible crisis, but from the confidence that they were held by love that anticipates their needs before they even know what those needs will be. The manna stopped appearing once they reached the land flowing with milk and honey. It taught remained with them. True security isn't found where they could plant crops and harvest their own food, but the lessened in accumulation, but in the daily trust that whatever today requires will be provided. As you prepare for sleep tonight, consider the gift of this ancient wisdom. Tomorrow will bring its own challenges, its own opportunities, its own needs. But tomorrow will also bring its own provision, its own grace, its own fresh supply of whatever your soul requires. You tomorrow's problems tonight don't have to solve. You don't have to carry tomorrow's worries into tonight's rest. Like the Israelites in the wilderness, you can gather what you need for today. Trust that tomorrow's bread will appear with tomorrow's dawn, and let yourself sink into the Sabbath rest that has been prepared for you. The ground is covered with exactly what you need, no more and no less. And in the morning, when you wake refreshed and restored, you'll find that provision has appeared again, as faithful as the sunrise, as reliable as the dew. The stories we've shared tonight are like gentle streams that have been flowing for thousands of years, carrying peace to every generation that has stopped to drink from their waters. But there's one more tale that deserves our attention as we prepare to let sleep carry us away from the day's concerns. It unfolds in a city called Jericho, along a dusty road where travelers would pass daily on their way to and from Jerusalem. The sun was particularly harsh that day, beating down on the limestone rocks and making the air shimmer with heat. Most people sought shade during the hottest hours, but one man had positioned himself deliberately in the full glare of the afternoon sun, not because he enjoyed the discomfort, but because this spot offered him the best chance of being noticed. His name was Bartimaeus, and he had been blind from birth. Every day, he would make his way to this same location beside the road, spreading his worn cloak on the ground and settling himself there with the patience of someone who had learned that survival sometimes required waiting through long, empty hours for brief moments of kindness from passing strangers. The sounds of the road had become his world. He could distinguish between the heavy footsteps of merchants carrying laden packs and the lighter steps of women carrying water jars back from the well. He knew the particular shuffle of elderly people moving carefully over the uneven stones and the quick patter of children running between a picture in his mind, the market stalls. Each sound, paint creating a landscape built entirely from noise and imagination. On this particular afternoon, Bartimaeus began to notice something different in the rhythm of the road. Instead of the usual scattered individuals going about their business, he could hear a large group approaching. Voices were raised in excitement, and there was an energy in the air that spoke of something unusual happening. "What's going on?" he called out to someone passing by. "Why are so many people gathered together?" The answer that came back made his heart begin to race with a hope he had almost forgotten he could feel. "Jesus of Nazareth is passing by," came the reply. "The teacher everyone's been talking about. They'd heard the stories, say he can heal people." Bartimaeus had whispered conversations between travelers who had witnessed things that seemed impossible. A man born lame, who had walked away from his mat after 38 years of paralysis. A woman who had been bent double for 18 years. suddenly standing straight and tall. Children brought back from the very edge of death, their fevered bodies cooled by a simple touch. But hearing stories and believing them enough to act on them were very different things. For just a moment, Bartimaeus hesitated. What if the stories were exaggerated? What if this Jesus was just another wandering teacher who spoke beautifully, but had no power to change doubt and was ignore anything? What if he called, becoming just another desperate voice in the crowd? Then he heard the footsteps getting closer, and something deep within him seemed to catch fire. This might be his only chance. This teacher, who was said to have compassion for the suffering, might never pass this way again. Without allowing himself to think about dignity or propriety or what others might say, Bartimaeus began to shout, "Jesus, Son of David, have mercy on me." His voice cut through the general murmur of the crowd like a blade. People turned to look, some with curiosity, others with irritation. A blind beggar was disrupting what they considered a dignified procession. "Be quiet," several people hissed at him. "Show." But Bartimaeus had waited some respect and his entire life for this moment, and he wasn't about to let social expectations silence him now. If anything, their attempts to hush him only made him call out more loudly, "Jesus, Son of David, have mercy on me." The words seemed to pour out of him with all the accumulated longing of decades spent in darkness. He had nothing left to lose and everything to gain. This was his moment to reach across the void that separated his world of perpetual night from the possibility of seeing light for the first time. Then something wonderful happened. The footsteps stopped. The crowd grew quiet. And a voice that was somehow both gentle and authoritative spoke words that changed everything. "Call him here." These ancient stories continue to whisper their truths across the centuries, offering the same peace they brought to countless souls who came before us. From the perfect rest of creation's seventh day to the blind man's joyful healing, each narrative carries within it the promise that no matter how dark our nights or how heavy our burdens, there is always light waiting to break through. As your breathing deepens and your thoughts begin to drift, let these timeless words settle into your spirit like dew on morning grass. Tomorrow will bring its own challenges and its own mercies, but tonight, you can rest in the certainty that you are held by the same love that spoke worlds into existence and calms every storm. Sweet dreams.